The last question, however, how am I being treated here, is a continuously needing question we have around that interesting construction we begin to develop in our first year and throughout the rest of our lives, our sense of self. There is something about the way people talk to us that lets us know whether our self is being enhanced or diminished in every situation. So the answer to how am I being treated is critical. It allows us to interpret what's going on in the situation as a whole. If we don't get a clear answer to how am I being treated, then we decide we really don't know what's going on and we don't like it. How communications theorists see all this, of course, is different than our everyday model of talk. We needed to build a model of talk that reflected these interconnected fundamental needs. So we had to move away from our model of talk as rhetoric, which is essentially one-way communication, to a model of talk that is face-to-face and is two-way. By the 1950s, we had put together a basic model that says there's a sender in every face-to-face moment and a message, and they send that message down channels to a receiver of the message. Not surprising, perhaps, it was called the SMCR, Sender Message Channel Receiver Model. Technically very practical, I suppose, but not very poetic. Finally, we have two people to study, sender and receiver, unlike the older model of rhetoric, which was really focused only on the sender and their manipulation of words. We also added two additional concepts. First, noise, to clarify potential problems with the sending of the message. Noise is anything that interferes with this sending. And a second concept, feedback, the receiver's immediate verbal responses to whatever the sender said. Now, this is how it works. We have a person on the left-hand side of our model. They're the sender. Their job is to encode a message. They have to take the ideas in their head and put together a string of word symbols. We talked about this in Lecture 1. And make the prediction that when they string this together, they have a sensible message that the other will somehow get. They're going to send it to the person on the other side of the model. They're going to send it down channels of the body's sensory perception systems: sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste. And for most of our communication, we use sight and hearing. Occasionally, we use touch depending on who the conversation is with and how well we know them. But here, we're just going to send our message via words spoken to the ears of the person across from you. And their job is to decode. That's their function as a receiver. And how do they decode the message? They have to assign meaning to the incoming symbols that we've strung together in our head and uttered as words to get or understand our message. Seems like it's all working right. Except to be more realistic, we've added the concept of noise to the model, because anything that can get in between two people and interrupt the message, we call physical noise and may alter the message as it comes across. So we have the classic situation of the uncertain suitor standing on the street corner beside his beloved, fiddling with the diamond ring in his pocket. He finally gets up the nerve and turns to her and says, "Honey, will you?" And a huge truck goes by. The air horn blasts and she doesn't get the words, "Marry me." And she looks up and says, "What?" And he goes, "Nothing, nothing." Interfering noise can happen all the time. Think of the number of times you're driving around with your cell phone and you drive into your underground parking lot, or you drive under an overpass and the signal just goes. Physical interruption of signal means that the person you were trying to get across to may actually get a different message than you intended. But there are other kinds of noise as well. For instance, there's noise in the sender's head. We call this semantic noise. What if the sender actually picked the wrong set of symbols? Perhaps spoke over the head of the other person by using words that were too abstract or too complicated, or required a different level of education in the receiver than the ones we should have picked. I'm sure this has happened to all of us at some point. It's very frustrating. So we can have semantic noise in the head of the sender. We can also have what we call psychological noise in the head of the receiver. Now that's really interesting stuff. How is it that they don't unpack our message the way we meant it? Because, of course, they may have biases, prejudices, preconceptions, any number of things that can get in the way of their thoughts as they are actually trying to figure out what it is we said. The concept of noise added a whole series of insights and possible layerings of understanding about why messages do or do not get through. Now, as the model began to work, there were additional insights that came out of our experience in using it to analyze talk and out of the research that it inspired. Scientists came to recognize that what's in people's heads actually isn't noise, but their personal experience. What they got from our words may not be our meanings, but the meanings they actually put into the words as they were coming in. This was all summarized in a famous comment by David Berlow. He summarized a far more complex analysis into this famous bumper sticker. Meanings are in people, not in words. Words are empty vessels. The sender sticks his or her meaning into them, and then they travel to the receiver, who may actually put different meanings into them as they process them. And words don't have single meanings. They not only have multiple meanings in their written form, but they can have additional meanings that are specific to the receiver's experience. Now, what's interesting about this thought is, not only is it about the nature of meaning in a general sense, but it shifts our focus from the sender to the receiver. After 2,000 years of rhetorical analysis where we focused on the sender, now we put the receiver, the other person, at the center of our analysis. As our thinking and research progressed, we also realized we needed to move away from our traditional emphasis on words to a focus on the relationship between words and nonverbal displays in our analysis of the continuous and simultaneous flow of messages on both the sending and receiving ends of the process. Turns out people are not just talking about topics. They're entering into a kind of continuous transaction and exchange, and not just of words, but of definitions of themselves and definitions of the other person, while they're actually talking about a topic.